So the next speaker is Marc Fersztand, and he's going to tell us about Harder-Narasimhan filtrations of persistence modules, first by slides and then by board. So this would be great.
Okay, so this talk is based on joint work with Emile Jacquard, with another PhD student in Oxford, and our two supervisors, Vidit and Ulrike. So the main goal of this project was to use techniques inspired by GIT for topological data analysis, and more precisely, to apply stability conditions of quiver representations for quiver representations that arise in topological data analysis. So the first part of this talk will be on slides, and it will be a short introduction to TDA, where I will motivate which quiver representations we are interested in. I will then set up the notation for stability conditions on quiver representations, and in the last two sections, I will talk about the results we have. Okay. So also, if you have any question, please don't hesitate to interrupt me at any point of this presentation. Okay. So persistent homology is one of the main techniques in TDA. So its input is a point cloud, so a bunch of points in a metric space. And the goal is to extract topological information about it. So in this example, the points are roughly sampled around a circle, and we would like to extract information telling us that there is some underlying circle for these data sets. So the main steps of this pipeline is first to transform this bunch of points in a metric space to a combinatorial object, which is a filtration of simplicial complexes. The second step is to take the homology of this filtration of simplicial complexes so as to get what's called persistence modules. And since we take homology on some fixed field, this lies in the realm of linear algebra. So it's a bunch of vector spaces and linear maps. And the last step is to take a summary of those persistence modules, which is both discrete and easily interpretable. And those are the persistence diagrams, and they look like this. So I will go in slightly more detail for each of those steps. Okay. So the first step is how you build your simplicial complex. So one of the key ideas in persistent homology is that if you choose a radius and you grow a ball of radius R around each of the points of your point cloud, the union of all these orange balls will give you a topological space, and the homology of this topological space will have interesting information at the scale corresponding to the radius you chose. So since we want to do computations, we will have a simplicial complex, which will be the proxy for the topological space. And how we build this simplicial complex. So the zero-dimensional simplices would be just the points in the point cloud. The one-dimensional simplices will be edges between 2 points whose balls intersect. And for higher dimensional simplices, we just add them whenever all the one-dimensional faces are already selected in our simplicial complex. So that's how we get this filtration of simplicial complexes. And once we go through homology over some field, all these inclusions become linear maps, and we get this object, which we call a persistence module. And we can see it as a functor from the category of real numbers as a poset to the vector spaces over your field. One important thing is that if you start with a finite number of points at the beginning, there is only a finite number of radii where the homology changes. And so these objects are a bit more complicated than the one you get by doing this pipeline. Okay. So finally, the last step is how you build your persistence diagram, how you take a summary of your persistence modules. So in fact, what we do is we take our persistence module V, and if V is pointwise finite dimensional, we can decompose it as a direct sum of indecomposable persistence modules. So you can see this equation as being for quiver representations instead preferred. And so this is what's called the structure theorem. And those indecomposable persistence modules are of the following form. So they are called interval module. And given some interval in R, the spaces involved in it are of dimension 1 between A and B and 0 outside. And all the maps between non-zero spaces are identities. Okay. And so what we do is we take our persistence module, we compute this decomposition, and then we plot for each interval module AB in our decomposition, we plot AB in the plane, and we get a multiset of points in the plane. And the multiplicity of the multiset is the multiplicity of the decomposition. So that's how persistence diagrams are built. And the way to interpret it is, so here in this diagram, so this diagram is for the example here. The green point is the one-dimensional homology, so the one cycles. And there is one point which is far from the diagonal. It means that there's a one cycle which was detected across a broad range of scales. And so we say that this point is significant. And in fact, it comes from the fact that we had this underlying circle in our data set. Okay, so that's it for the introduction, okay, to a standard persistent homology. One of the problems with this technique is that it's not robust to outliers, meaning that if we have this nice circle, we get a strong signal, one point very far from the diagonal. But if we add just one point in the middle, then the signal is like considerably weakened. And in order to fix this issue, one of the ideas was to say, oh, let's remove all the points in low density regions. But since we don't know which density threshold to choose, we also choose all possible density thresholds. And instead of getting a filtration of simplicial complexes, we get a bifiltration of simplicial complexes. And we can still take the homology of that, and we get a functor from R2 to the vector spaces. But the last step of taking the persistence diagrams becomes much more challenging. Okay, so now I will try to motivate which quiver representations we are interested in based on what we've done. So these are my notations for quiver representations. So S and T are source and target maps, and all and those are the most interesting quiver representations in EDA. So, so the top one on the left is the one you obtain for like the one parameter, the standard persistent homology pipeline. And the one here is the one we obtain for the multi-parameter persistent homology, which is the most interesting for this talk. And those two on the right also sometimes appear for homology pipelines, but are less frequent. Okay. And okay, so you can see that all these representations are finite, and we also assume that the representations are pointwise finite dimensional. And one thing which is quite important is that if all the quiver representations we obtain by computing persistent homology, in fact, since they are functor on some poset, the representations we get, they are equalized, meaning that if you take a linear map associated with a path in your quiver, so you compose all the linear map along the path, then what you obtain only depends on the source and the target of a path. So it's basically a quiver with relations, and the relation is that every square in your quiver will commute. Yes. Okay, and once we've done that, we can use, so we can first use standard quiver representation theory, in particular Gabriel's classification of quiver representations of quivers into finite, tame, and wild. And it says that the first two are finite type, and that they're indecomposable are nice. And they are, in fact, this is in fact a weaker version of the structure theorem from before that you can get from Gabriel's work. However, for these grid quivers, this is a wild type, even if we add the equalized relations. And so we won't be able to compute efficiently a decomposition into a decomposable and to do the same approach as one parameter. So what we want to do instead is to find invariants which are not necessarily complete. So for us, an invariant will be, so you can imagine that Q is this grid quiver, and we want an invariant. So it's an isomorphism invariant. And obviously we want this invariant to be discrete because we want to put it in our computer. We want to be able to compute it, and we want it to be informative. So informative meaning that it can distinguish big classes of representations. So the best case for informative is being complete, which means that from the output of the invariant, you can retrieve the isomorphism type of your representation. And in the case of one parameter persistence, the persistence diagrams were doing exactly this job. However, we know from Gabriel's classification that for the grid quiver, it won't be possible to get both discrete and complete. So we're trying to get something discrete, incomplete, but still try to prove that it's informative when we introduce invariants for the grid. Okay, and so I think I'm gonna stop here for the